Spiritual Development, the Creation of an Authentic Spirituality for the 21st Century. This chapter is entitled Increasing Self-Awareness, how to move the primitive ego from a childhood, relatively immature ego into a more self-aware, awakened adult ego. Okay, let's begin. First big idea in this chapter. The primitive ego slides into the unconscious at about 7 years of age. Now, that's a rough figure, plus or minus, but basically we're talking a first, second grader maybe, okay? So all of the things that we learn about trust, intimacy, authority, everything we learn in those first 7 years of life slide into our unconscious. And they become, if we don't awaken, they become the way that we see the world. In other words, the maps that we create in childhood are the maps we use to navigate the adult world. And as we've talked in previous videos, that's not a good idea. The adult world is far too sophisticated and gray for a childhood ego to successfully navigate it. So again, nothing wrong with our primitive ego, it's just that it's immature, and if we want to be successful and happy in life, then we got to become more self-aware. Now, why is this important? Because second big point here in the chapter is that the primitive ego is our brain's operating system. If you look at your computer, you never see the operating system, or rarely. You see it when the computer turns on, but everything that happens in that computer goes through the brain's or through the computer's operating system. And in the same way, how we function emotionally, intellectually, the choices we make, the behaviors that we have, are all the unconscious operating system of our brain. So if we don't awaken ourselves to how our brain is working and how we're seeing the world, the maps that we're using, the way we think, then we're never going to be able to evolve that operating system into an adult, awakened, and more enlightened way of seeing the world. Okay? So this stuff is really important. And it's, again, I want to keep emphasizing our primitive ego is not bad. Our primitive ego is just young. Okay? And we don't want a first grade, second grade ego trying to run our lives. It won't work. Okay, third big idea. So those are the first two. Forgot to underline them. Okay. Next one is the concept of emotional knee-jerks. How do we identify our primitive ego? It's really, really simple. What we do is we watch for our emotional knee-jerks. And that means when somebody pokes us and we have an immediate response called a knee-jerk, okay? If we pay attention to those knee-jerks, it gives us an opportunity to see how our unconscious operating system is working. Another way of thinking about this is that these are the hot button issues in our life. Okay? For example, someone criticizes us and we get a knee-jerk reaction of defensiveness, we get angry, we get aggressive. This is just primitive ego. And what is the primitive ego trying to do? Protect its self-identity. Trying to protect, and the only way it knew how when it was little was to have a knee-jerk reaction. Well, obviously, if we're an adult and we're sitting in a meeting or sitting in a relationship and we want to have a healthy response as an adult, knee-jerks sometimes aren't real helpful, and we need to pay attention to them. Not that they're wrong, they're not helpful. Now, survival skills come out of this primitive ego system. Our primitive ego has a whole bunch of survival skills, okay, and how to navigate the world when you're little. We've looked at a couple of them. The need to be right. primitive ego protects itself and its own identity by assuming that all of its beliefs are right, okay, and then protecting them through knee-jerk reactions, kind of aggressively at times. Another is black and white thinking, okay, which is right and wrong thinking, or all or nothing thinking, okay. So one of the things we want to recognize is that our primitive ego operating system is kind of a knee-jerk emotional response to the world. Very me-oriented, very narcissistic, and very focused on protecting our self-identity. What we're protecting now, remember, is the self-identity of a first, second grader, okay? So we're not talking about an adult. We may look adult, we may sound adult, but we're not functioning as an adult. We're functioning as a first and second grader. Really important concept. Okay, next one, next big idea. Bent nickel beliefs, okay? Bent nickel belief is really simple. All it is, it's a belief that distorts reality. And if we distort reality and we don't examine it, and believe it or not, most of what we know in first and second grade is someone's opinion, someone told us what they thought we should do, and we've never re-examined it, okay? A good one, for example, is obedience to authority. Well, that's fine if you're in childhood, but you know, you don't want your parents upset with you if you're defying them all the time. But when somebody who is an authority figure comes along and tells you something and you take that as absolute truth and you never examine it for yourself, you're going to create a lot of pain for yourself and most importantly for people around you, because you're going to take all of those bent nickel beliefs and you're going to put them out as absolute truth, and because you're protecting your self-identity, it's going to be pretty rigid. It's going to be stated in the imperative voice of absolute truth. So, bent nickel beliefs need to be examined. Every time there's an emotional response, examine where it came from. Think about it. Pay attention. All of our isms, racism, sexism, all of these are unconscious, knee-jerk reactions and unexamined bent nickel beliefs. Okay? Another one is our beliefs and our emotional reaction around money. Money is a huge issue because money is never just money. Money is control. It's kind of a stand-in for a lot of different subjects. But again, they're just unexamined knee-jerks or unexamined bent nickel beliefs. Pay attention to them. Another really big one in relationship is our ability to maintain and have intimacy with other people. It's amazing how many if we learn in childhood, for example, that letting people get close is dangerous. Well, guess what? If we don't examine that, we're going to go through our whole life keeping people at a distance. Okay? Not helpful. And again, it's not that we're doing anything wrong, it's just we're not examining those beliefs that distort reality. In this case, they distort the reality of a personal relationship with another human being. Okay, fifth big idea, increase in self-awareness. How do we know if we are growing in self-awareness? Well, obviously, we're paying attention to our bent nickels, we're watching our emotional knee-jerks, we're paying attention to our need to be right, etc. And a best way to think about growth in self-awareness is that we begin to adopt a stance, an internal stance of not knowing, okay? The Buddhists would call this ego emptiness, okay? It's not knowing anything for certain, always having an open mind to explore a new idea. One of the ways you do that, and we're going to get into this significantly more in future chapters, and that is that middle path concept of looking for truth on both sides of every issue. That's a spiritual practice that it's just a way of coming at the world. You come at it with an empty ego, not knowing, and then looking, intentionally searching for truth on both sides. And the other is that a person who has achieved self-awareness or growth in self-awareness, which again, as we've talked about, is authentic spiritual growth, they have a tendency to self-educate. They don't take the beliefs that were handed down, the opinions of authority figures, for example, in their childhood. They explore for themselves. They self-educate. They'll take a concept and they'll say, okay, that's probably what I was taught in childhood, but is that helpful for me? Is that accurate? Is it useful? So, to summarize, growth and self-awareness, self-educate. Learn more about these things. Just don't take someone else's opinion and then transfer it as absolute truth, because that's what we're going to do. If our identity is based on that belief, that's exactly what we'll do. So, self-educate, begin to look for truth on both sides of the issue, and have a not knowing attitude. I call that open mind, open heart. It's an ego emptiness, basically. Examine your bent nickel beliefs, okay, because if you don't, they'll cause pain. Obedience to authority is a big one. Intimacy is another big one. Emotional knee-jerk, watch those emotional outbursts. Watch, and sometimes they won't come out outside, but you have them inside, okay? Somebody criticizes you and all of a sudden you get flushed, okay? And you can feel the adrenaline start to flow. That's just a bent nickel belief. It's a knee-jerk kicking in, okay? It's an old survival skill from childhood to protect your self-identity. You don't have to do that anymore as an adult. You have to create a self-identity, not protect one. Primitive ego is our brain's operating system. Examine it. Pay attention to it, because if you don't, you're going to have a 7-year-old ego mentality or consciousness trying to negotiate or pretend that you're an adult, okay? Unfortunately, you won't kid very many people other than yourself. A lot of times we don't see how we behave in the world, but other people do. So it's important to make sure that our operating system has been examined, all these concepts. And again, the first item, primitive ego is a 7-year-old, roughly first, second grade level of consciousness. And it is the operating system that we're going to use to make all of our choices and all our behaviors in the world. So it's really important stuff. And as we begin to look at this, it's helpful to pay attention to people around us. And because you can see the primitive ego and other people really easily. And the concept I want to leave you with today, other people will see your primitive ego if you haven't examined it. Okay? It'll just come out as your personality. Other people will see it very clearly. We need to see our own very clearly. Okay? Thanks for being with us today, and we'll be back with Chapter 4 down the road. Okay?